Hey guys, back with our sixth symbol or type of symbol in the symbolic universe. I realized now might be a good time to just kind of remind you of what we're talking about. Every type of symbol that we're talking about is a part of the symbolic universe, obviously, and it is a thing that holds meaning. Basically, what we're doing when we're taking apart the symbolic universe into its component parts is saying these are a pretty exhaustive list of everything that you will encounter as you walk through a particular day. Things in nature, human behaviors, things people made or material culture, things people imagined into existence or fictional symbols. Where we're going for the rest of our time talking about the symbolic universe is into dealing with people. And as such, it's a little bit philosophical. Not going to be overwhelmingly so, I don't think. But it's also going to be a little bit uncomfortable because what we're talking about, if you think about, as I contextualize this for you, what we're talking about is the idea that human beings hold meaning. Human beings, and I mean like individual people that you meet, the people that you're going to walk past today, hold meaning to you. The ones you know better hold multiple layers of meaning or more complex meanings. The ones that you've never seen before still hold meaning. I mean, remember, we walk through our day and we are constantly, without even thinking about it, without trying, analyzing what are the things around me and interpreting their meaning. It goes back to us as an animal species that had to be able to scan the environment and understand things in order to survive. Okay, which brings us to social locations. All right, social locations are not, this is a term that I don't love. I mean, the concept is great. The terminology of location is a problem. I'm going to give you 4 big points about social locations, and we're going to start with the definition of it. The definition of social location is first of all, nothing about a physical location. It has nothing to do with a place. In fact, I'm going to tell you on the exam, I will put something like classroom or grocery store or park down as incorrect answers for social location. Because the term, whoever came up with it in sociology, meant for it to mean something very specific. Social locations are socially important personal attributes. So think about personal attributes. You look at me right now and what you see is a guy with super short hair, a white person. You can't tell, but I have brown eyes. You can tell that I'm male. Well, I've told you that I'm married. I'm married to a woman, so I'm heterosexual. All of those are personal attributes that I have, but only some of them are socially important personal attributes. The fact that I have freakishly short hair is not particularly important. You will act toward people with different hair lengths in mostly the same way. It's not what we would consider a social location, but my white skin is absolutely a social location. It's a personal attribute, and it is incredibly socially important. The framing question for this lecture is, why is it that I can shoplift so easily? True story. My daughter and I went into a grocery store to buy, we were buying a bunch of stuff, but one of the things we were buying was a gift card. And what we did was, without thinking about it, took the gift card, which was like $20, I don't know, Starbucks card or something like that, put it into an actual greeting card, put the greeting card into the envelope, and then went and paid for it. And what got rung up was just the greeting card. So we shoplifted a $20 Starbucks card. Why is it that I can so easily do that? Part of the reason for that is that as of right now in American society, to be white is to not be suspected of things in the way to be of color is. My social location, this whiteness, is socially important. I am never going, if I get pulled over by the cops, I have almost no anxiety about the fact that traffic stop could turn into a violent or even deadly occurrence. Because right now, in our society, this social location of whiteness tends to put me in a much more advantageous situation compared to a black person or a Latino person. Okay, so that's what I mean by a socially important personal attribute. Again, my maleness, the fact that I'm a man, makes a difference in my life in a way that my brown eyes don't. I can, if I want to, go out running on campus at midnight without any sort of fear that I might be attacked in that situation. Um, a, a white woman in that situation, and I say white woman just because we were on the whole issue of whiteness making a difference before. Um, a white woman, but any woman, is not going to more than likely feel the same degree of freedom to do that. It affects her life, her social location. Okay, so to dial us back, socially important personal attributes are the definition of social location. That was big point number one. Big point number two is going to be two key terms that you need to know. There are actually three key terms for this, and I was going to put the third one at the end. But I think what I will do right now is give them all to you right now. Okay, so we've got the definition, which is social locations, socially important personal attributes. Examples of this really quickly, still on the definition: race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, at least for some people. If I was a practitioner of Islam in America right now, that could make a difference in the way that me being Catholic versus Protestant probably doesn't today, although there was a time in America when it did. Me being Jewish today, there's been a resurgence of hate crimes against Jews. That would make a difference. So what we see is some of them are socially important in terms of the way it affects my life. Okay. So let's go to our three key terms. The first key term is actually not on the board, but the second two are. The reason that the first one isn't is it's a term that you've been exposed to probably since middle school, which is stereotype. Now, what we learn stereotypes as is sort of overgeneralizations about a particular group of people, and that's true. Like, don't forget that definition. But I'm going to give you a slightly different definition, based on the idea that social locations are things that hold meaning. They are in the symbolic universe. Stereotypes, for that reason, can be defined as the meaning attached to a particular social location. Stereotypes, meaning attached to a social location. So the fact that in society we define blackness differently than whiteness. There have been just horribly depressing stories related to blackness versus whiteness in terms of how people understand what is kind of considered like a general person. So a psychological study that happened where people were asked to describe this particular person, and all you see is a silhouette, but the silhouette is given a name. The name is something that would be more stereotypically white sounding, so like John, as opposed to something that would be more stereotypically black sounding, like Jamal. And what happens, and this is just horrible, I hate even that I have to report this to you. What happens is the same silhouette, right? The same, like you can't see any sort of details in the person. It's just like a blacked out silhouette. People if it's Jamal as compared to John, people overestimate the age, people overestimate the height, people overestimate the weight of that person. Even though it's the same silhouette, the only difference is you're told this is Jamal as opposed to John. Which suggests that right now in American society, and I'm not saying you do, I'm saying that the stereotype that is attached to the social location is one that is more threatening. And if you think about that, some of the degree of violence that we've seen lately in American society starts to make a little bit of sense. I don't mean to say that this is a complete explanation for like police shootings, but it does make some sense that if our outcome is a behavior of police officers being more likely to shoot a black suspect than a white suspect, how does that pattern get produced? Well, it makes sense that if a cop gets put into a machine that defines a particular social location, blackness, as more threatening, they would be more likely to reach for their gun more quickly. If you feel like you're threatened, you want to defend yourself. This is in no way meant as like an excuse of any sort of violence. This is all sociologists try to do is understand how does that pattern end up happening at the end. Okay, so we've got stereotypes. Stereotypes being defined as the meaning attached to a particular social location. Next term is implicit bias. Implicit bias is a horrible term as well that is going to, because what it suggests is that there's an unconsciousness to the way we interact with different social locations. Implicit bias means unconscious attitudes about a social location based on exposure to stereotypes. Unconscious attitudes about a social location based on exposure to stereotypes. The idea here is that you may not be a racist person, but if you are inserted into a machine that defines different social locations differently, and you learn that, you learn those stereotypes, even if you don't believe them, there's at least some degree of likelihood that you may, at times, have thoughts based on that stereotype or behave in ways based on that stereotype. The research on this is thoroughly depressing. The best research that I'm aware of, that's neuroscience research on implicit bias, suggests that about 80%, 75 to 80% of white people, not 75 to 80% of white people are racist, but have some degree of implicit bias. They are more likely to associate positives with whiteness than with blackness. They're quicker to do it. It doesn't mean that they necessarily act on that. But again, if we're thinking about something like a police shooting, right? Those are times when you don't have a lot of time to sort of say, oh, this stereotype came up. Oh, yeah, that's a stereotype. I don't want to act on that. The decisions are split second. And in those split-second decisions, an implicit, an unconscious bias could end up influencing behavior. The other aspect of that implicit bias research that I just cited is that the best research that we have is about 50% of black and brown people also have a pro-white bias. In other words, it's not that a bunch of white people step into this machine and become racist. It's that a bunch of people step into this machine, learn the stereotypes associated with social locations, and have some degree of implicit unconscious bias. That's it. That's the point about that, which is, again, thoroughly depressing. I don't mean to make people defensive about this. I'm certainly not here to say I'm free of this and you are ignorant and so, try to figure stuff out. It's difficult to know who has implicit bias, and the best we can do is try to be aware of the fact that our society creates this in us, and if we don't want to act in those ways, to try to be conscious of what our biases are and try to deal with them. Okay, last term that we need to get is intersectionality, which is a long term, and as you can see, the basis of it is the idea of an intersection. An intersection, in this case, of different social locations. The idea behind intersectionality is that your experience depends on multiple dimensions of social location. So, for example, and I kind of did this when I talked about my feeling of freedom to be able to go running at night. It's not just that I am that I am male, but that I'm white, that allows me to experience that. Because an African American or Latino guy who goes running at night might be seen as more suspect or more suspicious because of the stereotypes associated with social locations. Um, my experience is going to be different than a black man's experience. My experience is going to be different than a white woman's experience, because it's the intersection of my different social locations, my whiteness, my maleness, my heterosexuality, all of those things combine to influence the way my life goes in ways that, I didn't do anything to earn. Um, and just as a person who is in a situation, a different intersection of social locations, didn't do anything to end up with the cards that they were dealt. Okay, that is it for us for this one. So what we have are several terms: the term social location, the term stereotype, the term implicit bias, the term intersectionality. Again, to draw back from the trees and focus on the bigger picture, what we're talking about now is we've got things in nature that we define. They're symbols. We've got human behaviors that we define. Those are symbols. We've got material culture, the things that are built. And now what we're looking at are the individuals walking around. Right now we don't know them. All we know is white person, black woman, whatever, the different social locations. And what we need to be aware of is the fact that there are different definitions attached to those. They're called stereotypes. And that whether you choose to believe in stereotypes or not, they seem to, the best neuroscience that we have, suggests that they influence, at a minimum, some of our thoughts, and at a maximum, possibly some of our behavior. All right, that's it for this video. Next video, we will get into, I believe, a little bit more, a little bit less superficial with the people who function as symbols around us. I will see you in that video.